In this video, we're going to highlight some really creative roof techniques that have been shared over the years in the MakerPipe community. These are going to be really useful if you're making anything from a greenhouse to a canopy for your patio. There's all kinds of ways that you can utilize these techniques. But before I highlight the techniques, I do want to mention that all of these are made entirely with off-the-shelf electrical conduit and then the clamps that we manufacture in upstate South Carolina that allow you to build all kinds of awesome things like the different projects that we're going to see today. And there's been some really great ones that have been shared over the years. This first one was a recent one from Johnny, and these first couple of builds that I want to highlight actually showcase just utilizing connectors that we already have available and not really, doing any special technique or anything really too creative. It's really just using connectors that already exist to make a roof. And we can see here that that's exactly what Johnny did with this greenhouse. And he used the 135 degree connector there at the peak of the roof to just create this, simple roof structure that has a nice angle to it. It's not going to allow any water from, a rainstorm coming through to pull up on top. And then it has a ridge pole all the way from the front to the back and just utilizes that connector just to make this standard roof, like I said, with this angle. And, you could use the 90 degree connector. You could use the 135 and really achieve this kind of angled roof really easily without doing anything too crazy. So that's what I wanted to highlight first, was just kind of utilizing connectors that already exist to make that. And we can see another example of this here. This one comes from Corey, and this was a simple enclosure roof that he put together, and it's just using a 90 degree connector to create this really harsh angle here and just has a nice peaked roof to it. So you can do that really easily just utilizing those connectors that we already have that use 3 pieces of conduit to create this angled connection. And like I said, usually the 90 or the 135 degree connector is what we see the most common for these types of roofs. But that's really simple to create. And then you can start getting really creative and doing different things in your builds, as we'll see in some of these other projects like this greenhouse from Frank. We can see here that he utilized a handheld tubing bender to create the roof of this structure. And he did that by just creating, I could be wrong about this one, I'm pretty sure this is a 45 degree bend, another 45 degree bend, and then another 45, and another 45. I think that would make the 180 degrees, like the half of the circle that you would need for this to create a full, kind of square project. I could be wrong. Please let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but pretty sure that is what you would be doing. Just 45, 45, 45, 45. And you can use the handheld tubing bender, and we have a tutorial on the channel that I'll link down below. You can check that out if you want to learn how to use that tool. And if you're doing a big project like this, it can be cheaper to utilize the handheld tubing bender for this instead of utilizing, say, the 45 degree connector from MakerPipe. Because if you need 4 of those per roof peak, that's going to add up quickly. And you can just invest in the handheld tubing bender and then do this a bunch of times, to kind of create this roof peak instead of using the connectors. Or if you don't want to use the bender, you could also just get the 45 degree connector and attach it to the top of the vertical there, attach it again there, and pretty much create this same roof structure. Using the bender for this type of roof, I think, is really useful and handy and something to keep in mind if you're building a structure like this. Another idea is one that I really like a lot, and I'm surprised we don't see this more often. This comes from Sandy, and she did say it was a little challenging to complete because it does require a lot, especially with the way that she did it with the arch roofs. But I think this is a really good way to make a roof structure in a build. And essentially, it just utilizes the conduit verticals that you have going up and then attaches a adjustable angle connector at the very top of those. And then you basically just utilize the top half of the adjustable angle connector, which allows you to create pretty much any angle you want. And then you can just adjust that to get the angle that you want and then just send that pipe up to the roof peak. And I think hers is really complex because she has this large arch incorporated into it, but you don't have to do that. You could just have a straight piece of conduit. Let me highlight this here. That pretty much just goes inside of the connector and then goes up to the roof peak. So it doesn't have to be an arch. It could just be adjustable angle there, and then the piece of conduit in the top half will also extend out of the piece or out of the top half of the connector, which I think is useful if you want an overhang for your project. But then you could just have this straight piece that goes all the way up to a roof peak. And then you could utilize, one of the other connectors, like we mentioned, the 135 or the 90, or even the T connector, as we'll see here in a minute, to basically create this this peaked roof that, you can achieve pretty much any angle that you want and just grab on to that vertical piece and then go up to the peak of the roof in that way. And of course, you just do the same thing on this side to just achieve that peaked roof. But I'm surprised we don't see that example or that technique more often in projects, because I think it's a really good way to do a roof structure, especially, like I said, if you need that overhang. And this is a great project from Sandy that kind of utilizes this technique. And this is similar, except it's more of just like half of a roof. It's just the slope. And this is covering a grilling station that Chris put together. But essentially, it's the same technique where you have this vertical piece of conduit going up from the baseboard that goes all the way up. And then the very top of that, you have the adjustable angle connector. And the top half of that is just angled and grabbing onto this piece of conduit that's going down to a shorter vertical in the front. And then another adjustable angle connector to achieve this nice slope here. So, the rain is going to just, slide right off of there whenever it's coming down. And you have, snow and other things just going to slide right off. You don't have to worry about it pulling up on top. If this was flat and potentially causing the frame to collapse, it's going to help prevent that a lot by just adding this nice slope. And essentially, you just take advantage of the adjustable angle connector and just, attach those to the verticals that you have at different lengths. And then you can essentially just create any angle that you want for this roof peak. And I think that's a really great technique for creating different roofs for structures, which is really awesome and just something to keep in mind whenever you're designing your build. Another great idea, and this one comes from Zach and his beautiful trellises here, is creating a large arch for your structure, kind of like what we saw with Sandy. And you can do this with a technique called incremental bending, where it's a little bit different than what we saw earlier, where you bend one 45-degree angle, for example. This one, you bend a bunch of small angles until you achieve, a large radius. And essentially, you can use this technique to create really awesome looking structures that also have a lot of functionality, because just like all the others we've looked at, they're going to keep rain and snow from, kind of piling up on top. They'll slide right off, especially if you've got, like greenhouse plastic or something on this. This is more of an arch for the cattle panel to attach to. But essentially, you'll just use that technique. And there's some math involved in this, but I've created a calculator and a full video tutorial on how to make arches with conduit and a handheld tubing bender. So I'll link that down below so you can check that out and learn how to do this. But this is a really great technique that, like I said, adds a lot of functionality and I think just looks awesome in builds, as we can see here. Last but not least is a really great idea that we don't see that often, and this comes from Tony. And essentially, this is similar to what we talked about in the first part of the video, where we highlighted, using standard connectors that already exist. But what you could do if you have a unique angle or you don't really want to be too precise, you can utilize T connectors, which are among the most versatile in the MakerPipe system. And you can essentially put two of them side by side and angle them however you want to achieve the roof peak that you're after. And the only downside of this is it's going to be offset from each other, as you can see. So the two poles going down to the side of the build are going to be slightly different and offset from each other. But as long as that's not a problem in your build, I think this is a really great technique for roofing, because you can utilize the standard T connector, which, like I said, is very popular and versatile, and essentially create any kind of roof angle that you need for your build, which is exactly what Tony did here. And I think at the time we didn't have any more of the 135-degree connectors in stock, but I think even if we do have those, this is still a great technique to keep in mind whenever you're building a roof, because like I said, you can do any angle that you want, and it's a pretty easy technique to achieve by just doing two of these T connectors side by side and extending those down to the frame. And then you can use more T connectors on the sides to grab those and attach those to the horizontal piece of conduit on the side of your build. So that's really cool. And I think all these techniques are really useful. And if you have any questions about any of these, feel free to leave those down below in the comments, and I'll be happy to help. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.